In the vast, untamed bushland of New South Wales, the landscape stretches endlessly, the air thick with the scent of eucalyptus and scorched earth. This remote wilderness, both beautiful and unforgiving, is a place where secrets can remain hidden for years until fate intervenes. On a routine day, a team of firefighters was tasked with a controlled backburn, a critical operation to reduce fuel loads and prevent catastrophic wildfires. The crew moved methodically, their eyes trained on the shifting flames and the unpredictable wind. As the fire crept through the undergrowth, it exposed something jarringly out of place, a suitcase partially melted and smouldering, its synthetic fabric warped by the heat. The object sat alone, far from any road or sign of civilization, an anomaly in the wild. The firefighters, seasoned in the dangers of the bush, immediately sensed the gravity of their find. Their training kicked in, scene safety, evidence preservation, and the need to alert authorities. They cordoned off the area, careful not to disturb the scene further. Approaching the suitcase, the crew's apprehension grew. Inside, they discovered a plastic bag containing a human skull, small, unmistakably that of a child. The shock was immediate and profound, even for these experienced first responders. The discovery triggered a rapid escalation. The area was locked down, and the chain of custody began. Every movement was documented, every step photographed, to preserve the integrity of the evidence for forensic analysis. Police units arrived swiftly, their vehicles carving a path through the bush. The quiet was shattered by the arrival of law enforcement and forensic teams, each member acutely aware that the scene before them was the beginning of a complex and harrowing investigation. Forensic investigators began a meticulous search, laying out evidence markers and photographing every detail. Not far from the first suitcase, a second was discovered, this one intact, its exterior untouched by fire, but its presence deepened the sense of dread. The second suitcase was carefully documented and opened under controlled conditions. Inside, forensic examiners found further evidence of violence and restraint, the details of which would be crucial for later analysis. The presence of plastic bags and bindings was noted, each item photographed and catalogued. The forensic team worked with precision, aware that even the smallest fibre or trace could hold the key to identifying the victims and their killer. A further search of the first suitcase revealed a second small skull, confirming the presence of another child. The evidence was overwhelming, a scene of calculated cruelty preserved by the very fire meant to erase it. The bushland, now transformed into a sprawling outdoor crime scene, was mapped and gridded for systematic searching. Soil samples were collected, and every footprint, tire track and broken branch was scrutinized for clues. Forensic pathologists and crime scene analysts worked side by side, collecting trace evidence, hair, fibers, possible DNA. The suitcases themselves were dusted for fingerprints and examined for tool marks, hoping to reveal how they were transported and handled. As dawn broke over the bush, the scale of the investigation became clear. Detectives and forensic experts prepared for a long, painstaking process, one that would demand every ounce of their expertise and resolve. The wilderness, once silent and indifferent, now held the echoes of a crime that demanded answers. The investigation had only just begun, and the bush was not done giving up its secrets. With the horrifying discovery made, the investigators faced a daunting task: to restore the identities of the victims and reconstruct the intricate web of their lives and relationships. The first step was a public appeal, broadcasting the scant details available, remains of a woman and 2 young children found in suitcases. The case quickly drew national attention, and missing persons reports were cross-referenced with forensic findings. Among those who responded was a relative who had not heard from his family members in nearly a year. The emotional toll was evident, but the focus remained on the facts and the evidence. The victims were identified as Susan Park, her 3-year-old son Andrew, and her 8-month-old daughter Amy. Forensic teams meticulously catalogued every item found with the bodies, seeking connections to missing persons reports. Among the personal effects were a child's sweater, a well-loved teddy bear, and a single earring. Each item was analysed for trace evidence, fibres, DNA, and any unique identifiers that could confirm the victims' identities. The sweater matched photographs of Andrew, and the earring was consistent with jewellery seen in images of Susan. The teddy bear, bearing distinctive wear patterns, was recognised as belonging to the family. With the victims identified, investigators turned to their backgrounds. Susan Park, 31, was described as a devoted parent, striving to provide stability for her children despite significant personal challenges. Andrew, a curious and energetic toddler, was just beginning to explore the world. Amy, an infant, was at the earliest stage of life, her future tragically cut short. The family dynamic was complex. Susan had been estranged from her husband, Nick Park, who was the father of both children. Court records and interviews revealed a history of marital discord, marked by frequent arguments and a gradual emotional distance. Forensic psychologists were brought in to assess the psychological environment of the household. Reports indicated escalating stresses, financial strain, custody disputes, and social isolation, all of which contributed to a volatile atmosphere. The forensic evidence was chilling. Plastic shopping bags found tied tightly over each victim's head became the focal point of the investigation. No signs of overt trauma were present, no broken bones, no gunshot or knife wounds. The coroner's report confirmed asphyxiation as the cause of death for all 3 victims. The method suggested a perpetrator who was both methodical and intimately familiar with the victim's routines and vulnerabilities. The psychological profile developed by investigators pointed towards someone with a personal connection to the family, someone whose actions were driven by a complex mix of resentment, desperation, and control. As the investigation deepened, the focus shifted to reconstructing the timeline of the family's last known movements and interactions. Digital forensics, financial records, and witness statements were all scrutinized for inconsistencies and hidden motives. The chilling reality was clear. The perpetrator was not a stranger, but someone who had once been part of the victim's inner circle. The case now demanded not only forensic precision, but a deep understanding of the psychological forces at play within the fractured family. With the victims identified, the investigation entered a critical phase: the systematic collection and analysis of forensic evidence. The bushland crime scene presented significant challenges. The perpetrator had attempted to destroy evidence with fire, complicating the recovery of physical traces. Despite the fire, an unburnt suitcase and its contents survived, offering a trove of forensic material for examination. Every item at the scene was meticulously documented, collected and sealed in tamper-evident bags before being transported to the laboratory for further analysis. The twine used to bind the victim, the suitcase fabric, and the plastic bags were all subjected to detailed forensic scrutiny, including fibre analysis and material comparison. Investigators understood that even the most ordinary items could yield critical clues. Each piece of evidence was catalogued and cross-referenced for potential links to suspects. One of the most significant breakthroughs emerged from the analysis of the plastic bags. Forensic experts employed advanced techniques to search for unique identifiers. These bags were not generic or untraceable. Careful inspection revealed distinctive markings and manufacturing codes. Forensic specialists identified batch numbers printed on the plastic, which could be traced back to specific production runs and points of sale. This seemingly minor detail enabled investigators to track the bags to their retail origin, providing a tangible lead in the case. The investigation determined that the bags were sold at a specific shop in the Macquarie Centre, a location frequented by the victim. This discovery was pivotal, narrowing the timeline and location of the crime and suggesting a direct connection to the victim's daily life. The evidence strongly indicated that the murders likely occurred within the familiar environment of the victim's own flat in Eastwood, rather than an unknown location. Investigators reconstructed the timeline, focusing on the days immediately following the family's disappearance, 10 months earlier. A review of financial records revealed a series of suspicious transactions, prompting a deeper forensic audit. Shortly after the family vanished, the children's bank account was closed, raising immediate red flags for investigators. Forensic document examiners scrutinized the withdrawal slip, searching for latent prints and handwriting evidence. Their efforts revealed a clear palm print pressed onto the paper, a rare but highly valuable form of biometric evidence. The palm print was run through national databases and matched to Nick Park, who had a prior record for a minor fraud offence. This was the first piece of direct forensic evidence, linking Nick Park to the events surrounding his family's disappearance. Surveillance footage placed him at the bank, accessing his children's funds at the critical time investigators believe the murders occurred. The financial investigation continued, revealing further suspicious activity in the victim's accounts. Susan's bank account had also been drained, providing additional evidence of deliberate financial manipulation. By cross-referencing transaction logs and surveillance data, investigators built a comprehensive picture of the suspect's movements and actions. The forensic and financial evidence made it clear that Nick Park was not acting alone. The investigation now focused on identifying all individuals involved and understanding the full scope of the crime. To truly understand the events that led to the tragic Suitcase murders, investigators conducted a comprehensive review of the Parks family's background, examining not only their social dynamics, but also the psychological and forensic elements that shaped their lives. The Parks household was marked by a persistent sense of unease and instability, a fact that became increasingly clear as forensic teams and social workers pieced together the family's troubled history. For months prior to the murders, the couple had been living apart under the same roof, a situation that social services often identify as a precursor to domestic breakdown. Nick Park eventually moved out, taking up residence in a nearby suburb. This physical separation was accompanied by a growing emotional distance, as documented in interviews and psychological assessments. Friends, neighbours and professionals described the relationship as volatile, with frequent arguments and a lack of trust. These patterns are often seen in high-conflict separations and can escalate risk factors for violence. The psychological toll on both parties was significant. Reports indicate that Nick displayed signs of chronic stress and emotional instability, while the overall family environment deteriorated. The breakdown of the marriage was accelerated by Nick's infidelity, a fact confirmed through digital forensics and corroborated by multiple sources. The revelation of the affair had a profound psychological impact, contributing to a sense of betrayal and deepening the emotional rift within the family. The emotional fallout was severe, with evidence suggesting that both parties struggled to cope with the escalating stress and isolation. In the aftermath, professional intervention was sought. Psychologists and legal advisors recommended steps to secure the well-being of the children and ensure financial stability. Formal financial support was pursued, a standard procedure in cases of family separation, but one that can sometimes trigger further conflict, especially when financial pressures are already present. The financial strain on the Parks family was evident. Forensic accountants later uncovered a pattern of mounting debts and unpaid bills, underscoring the economic instability that plagued the household. Despite the turmoil, efforts were made to maintain a sense of normalcy for the children, though the fractured environment made this increasingly difficult. As the investigation progressed, Nick Park's character and psychological profile came under intense scrutiny from both law enforcement and mental health professionals. Nick's gambling addiction was well documented, with frequent visits to local casinos and significant financial losses. This addiction is recognized as a major risk factor for both financial and interpersonal crises. The resulting financial pressure was a constant source of conflict, exacerbating existing tensions and contributing to the overall instability of the family. When police first questioned Nick about his family's disappearance, his responses were evasive and inconsistent, raising immediate suspicions among investigators. He claimed that his wife had taken the children to Queensland to live with a relative, but provided no verifiable details. Nick's demeanour was notably unconcerned, treating the disappearance as a routine family separation, which further heightened police suspicions. Investigators quickly uncovered discrepancies in his story, prompting a deeper forensic review of his statements and actions. Contact with the supposed relative in Queensland revealed that no such plans had ever been discussed, and there had been no contact for months. This revelation was a critical turning point, signalling to investigators that Nick's account was deliberately misleading. When police returned to question Nick further, they found he had abruptly left his residence, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions. His sudden disappearance, combined with mounting forensic and psychological evidence, shifted the investigation from a missing persons case to a full-scale homicide inquiry. Nick Park's actions, financial troubles and psychological profile ultimately made him the prime suspect, as authorities intensified their search for answers in this chilling case. The investigation had uncovered a troubled relationship and a suspicious husband, yet the precise catalyst for the violence remained elusive, until a single, unassuming letter became the linchpin of the entire case. Detectives pored over timelines and motives, searching for the moment when tension transformed into tragedy. The breakthrough came with the discovery of an official letter from the Child Support Agency, found among the victim's personal effects. Forensic teams meticulously examined the letter. Every fingerprint, every fibre and every trace of DNA was catalogued. The envelope bore Nick's prints, confirming he had handled it. The ink was analysed, matching the agency's standard issue, and the postmark placed its delivery precisely on October 15th. Surveillance footage and postal records corroborated the letter's arrival. Investigators established that Nick had access to the letter within 48 hours of its delivery. The contents were clear and direct, a formal demand for child support payments, outlining his legal obligations and the consequences of non-compliance. Forensic analysis revealed the letter had been handled repeatedly, with pressure marks indicating agitation, creases, crumples, and even a faint tear at the edge. The psychological impact of the letter was evident. Investigators noted that Nick, already burdened by mounting gambling debts and financial instability, was now confronted with an unavoidable legal demand. The forensic timeline placed Nick's reaction to the letter as the pivotal moment. Witness statements and digital evidence, phone records, internet searches, showed a spike in his agitation and erratic behaviour immediately after the letter was opened. Investigators theorized that the letter, far from being a simple administrative notice, became the trigger for Nick's violent resolve. His anger, fueled by desperation, was redirected from the system to the person he blamed for his predicament. The events that followed behind closed doors would never be fully known, but the forensic evidence painted a chilling picture of premeditation and rage. Police reconstructed the sequence: the confrontation, the escalation, and the ultimate irreversible act of violence. The letter was not just evidence, it was the fuse. In the early hours of October 18th, Nick made a phone call. His words were cold, emotionless, and final. The forensic analysis of the call's timing and content would later corroborate the timeline of the murders. He returned to his flat, his demeanour altered, his actions deliberate. For Nick, the letter had not just demanded money, it had, in his mind, demanded a solution. The investigation concluded that the lives lost were reduced, in Nick's eyes, to obstacles, problems to be erased. The forensic trail from the letter to the crime scene told a story of cold calculation. The murders were not a crime of passion, but a meticulously executed act to avoid responsibility. The letter, intended to protect, had become the silent witness to a chilling crime. In the hours and days following the murders, Nick Park displayed a chilling absence of emotion. He neither mourned nor panicked. Instead, his every move was calculated, as if he were following a carefully rehearsed plan. Investigators later reconstructed his actions through a combination of surveillance footage, digital forensics, and witness statements. Nick began by systematically erasing his family's presence, destroying documents, making phone calls to close accounts, and packing up personal belongings. On October 18th, the day after the murders, Nick was captured on bank surveillance entering a local branch. There he used a forged withdrawal slip to close his children's account, pocketing the funds. Forensic experts later matched his palm print to the slip, providing a crucial link in the chain of evidence. Detectives traced his phone records, revealing a flurry of calls to financial institutions and service providers. Nick was methodically severing every financial tie to his former life, destroying bank cards and discarding paperwork to eliminate any traceable connections. He began liquidating assets, selling off furniture and pawning valuables for cash. Receipts and transaction logs, later recovered by police, mapped out his attempts to gather as much money as possible in a short time. Nick visited his children's daycare, formally withdrawing them and collecting a refund for prepaid fees. Staff recalled his calm demeanour and the story he told about relocating the family, a narrative he repeated to neighbours and acquaintances. On October 19th, Nick rented a car. That night, he drove the vehicle to Susan's Eastwood unit, as confirmed by rental records and security footage from the area. Forensic investigators believe it was here that Nick loaded 2 heavy suitcases, later found to contain the bodies, into the trunk. Tyre tracks and trace evidence at the scene supported this timeline. GPS data from the rental car and traffic cameras tracked Nick's route as he left the city, heading toward remote bushland. There, he was seen dragging the suitcases into the wilderness, abandoning them in a secluded area. At the scene, forensic teams later discovered evidence of an attempted fire. Nick had tried to burn one of the suitcases, likely in a desperate effort to destroy evidence. Fire accelerant traces and partially burned materials were collected for analysis. With the bodies hidden, Nick used the cash he had amassed, just over $2,000, at a local casino. Surveillance footage and transaction records confirmed he gambled away the entire sum, showing no remorse for his actions. Throughout the investigation, police relied on a combination of forensic science and traditional detective work. Fingerprint analysis, digital tracking, and careful review of surveillance footage allowed them to reconstruct Nick Park's movements with precision, ultimately building a comprehensive case against him. With the bodies disposed of and the evidence hastily concealed, Nick Park's next move was calculated and cold. With only a modest sum of cash and his essential documents, Nick began to orchestrate his escape from Australia. He was acutely aware that his fabricated story about Susan's move to Queensland would soon unravel. The pressure was mounting. Just 12 days after Susan and her children vanished, Nick Park and his girlfriend Demi made their way to Sydney Airport. They blended in with the crowds, passing through the terminal with practiced nonchalance. Their destination, Seoul, South Korea, Nick's homeland, and he hoped a safe haven. Nick likely believed that distance would shield him from suspicion and justice, allowing him to start anew. He was determined to leave his past behind, convinced that the authorities would be unable to follow. The home he left behind was now a silent witness to his crimes, stripped of the family he had so ruthlessly abandoned. Yet their departure did not go unnoticed. Modern airport security systems flagged their exit. As Nick and Demi passed through customs, an alert was triggered, linking them to a recent missing persons report. The system cross-referenced their names with the report filed by Susan's sister-in-law, Mina, and immediately notified federal agents. Law enforcement at the airport quickly mobilized, coordinating with national and international agencies. Nick was pulled aside for questioning, but with no bodies found and no direct evidence, the case was circumstantial at best. Investigators had only suspicions and a growing sense of urgency. Without concrete proof, they could not detain Nick or prevent his departure. The agents watched helplessly as Nick and Demi proceeded to their gate. During questioning, Nick remained composed, offering a plausible story about visiting a sick relative in South Korea. He assured authorities it was a brief trip, showing a return ticket and promising to come back in 10 days. It was a calculated deception designed to buy time and deflect suspicion. With no legal grounds to hold him, the agents had no choice but to let Nick and Demi board their flight. They watched, powerless, as the prime suspect in a potential triple homicide left Australian soil. Upon arrival in Seoul, Nick Park wasted no time disappearing into the bustling city. The promised 10 days passed, but Nick made no attempt to return to Australia. He and Demi vanished into the anonymity of the city, leaving investigators with few leads. Back in Australia, the missing persons case grew colder, with investigators frustrated by the lack of progress. 10 months later, a grim discovery in the bushland reignited the investigation and transformed it into an international manhunt. With the victims identified and evidence pointing directly to Nick, Australian authorities escalated their efforts. An international arrest warrant was issued through Interpol, and the search for Nick Park became a global operation. Nick, now working as an English teacher in South Korea, tried to maintain a low profile. But as news of the international warrant spread, he quickly went underground, changing addresses and severing ties. Despite his efforts to evade capture, law enforcement agencies in both countries intensified their collaboration, sharing intelligence and tracking his movements. The international investigation was now in full force, with Australian and South Korean authorities working side by side, determined to bring Nick Park to justice. As the net tightened, Nick's freedom was living on borrowed time. The world was closing in. In any major homicide investigation, it is essential for detectives to rigorously examine every plausible scenario, ensuring that no stone is left unturned and no bias clouds the pursuit of truth. Before focusing on Nick Park as the primary suspect, investigators systematically developed and tested a range of alternative theories, each subjected to forensic scrutiny and logical analysis. One of the earliest hypotheses was the possibility of a murder-suicide. Investigators considered whether the deaths could have resulted from a tragic internal family event. Forensic evidence, however, quickly undermined this theory. The methodical concealment of the bodies in suitcases and their remote disposal indicated planning and physical effort inconsistent with a self-inflicted scenario. The presence of multiple forensic markers, such as the absence of self-inflicted wounds, lack of suicide notes, and the logistics of transporting the suitcases, further ruled out the murder-suicide hypothesis. The autopsy findings and crime scene analysis confirmed the involvement of a third party, shifting the investigation toward external suspects. Another avenue explored was Nick Park's well-documented gambling addiction. Detectives hypothesized that the murders could have been orchestrated by criminal elements as retribution for unpaid debts. Investigators delved into Nick's financial records, searching for links to loan sharks or organized crime syndicates that might have had motive and means to commit such a crime. They examined phone records, bank statements, and any evidence of threats or extortion attempts, seeking a financial trail that could implicate outside parties. Collaboration with regional crime units and international agencies ensured that no cross-border criminal connections were overlooked. Despite exhaustive efforts, the investigation found no evidence of large-scale debts, suspicious transactions, or associations with criminal organizations that could support the loan shark theory. The absence of corroborating evidence led to the formal dismissal of this line of inquiry. Investigators confirmed that Nick Park's financial situation, while troubled, did not reach the threshold typically associated with violent criminal retribution. Other potential motives and suspects were also considered, including the possibility of a targeted attack by an unknown associate or a random act of violence. Each scenario was tested against the available forensic evidence, such as shoe prints, fingerprints, and surveillance footage, but none aligned with the facts of the case. Forensic analysis of trace evidence, DNA, and fibers found at the scene consistently excluded unknown third parties, reinforcing the improbability of an external perpetrator. Interviews with neighbours and witnesses yielded no credible reports of suspicious activity or unfamiliar individuals near the crime scene during the relevant time frame. As each alternative theory was methodically investigated and disproven, the focus of the case narrowed. The cumulative lack of forensic, financial and testimonial evidence supporting any theory, other than direct involvement by Nick Park, became undeniable. The investigative process, grounded in professional standards and forensic rigour, left only one scenario consistent with all the evidence. With each alternative theory eliminated, the case against Nick Park was built on a foundation of exclusion, logic, and scientific analysis. The process of elimination, supported by forensic rebuttals and investigative logic, left no reasonable doubt as to the identity of the perpetrator. The convergence of motive, opportunity, and physical evidence, such as the child support letter, Nick Park's misleading statements, and his palm print on a forged bank slip, pointed conclusively to him. In the end, the exhaustive and professional investigation left only one logical conclusion. The crime was not the result of random chance or external threat, but a calculated act of domestic violence. The evidence, the logic, and the process all led to a single, chilling truth. Justice would now depend on the courts. The global search for Nick Park reached its conclusion 1 year and 7 months after the brutal murders of his family. The investigation had spanned continents, with law enforcement agencies from Australia, South Korea and Interpol working in close coordination to track his movements and secure his capture. After abandoning his teaching position and attempting to disappear in South Korea, Park was identified through a combination of surveillance footage, financial tracking, and international intelligence sharing. He was apprehended without incident by local authorities, who had been monitoring his activities for several weeks. The extradition process was swift and meticulously executed. Australian Federal Police coordinated with South Korean officials to ensure Park's secure transfer, and he was placed under constant guard during the journey back to Australia. Upon arrival in Australia, Park was immediately taken into custody by the lead detectives who had pursued the case from the beginning. Security was tight and every step of the transfer was documented to ensure the integrity of the process. During interrogation, Park remained silent and uncooperative, refusing to answer any questions regarding the fate of Susan, Andrew and Amy. His demeanour was cold and detached, offering no insight or remorse. Despite his silence, the case against him was formidable. Forensic teams had assembled a comprehensive body of evidence, including fingerprints, trace fibres and digital records. The crime scene had been meticulously reconstructed, and every piece of physical evidence was cross-referenced with the timeline of events. The trial commenced in a high-security courtroom, with significant public and media attention. The prosecution presented a detailed narrative, supported by forensic experts, detectives, and a wealth of physical evidence. Forensic testimony was central to the prosecution's case. Experts explained how Park's fingerprints were found on the suitcases and plastic bags used to conceal the bodies. DNA analysis confirmed the victims' identities and linked Park directly to the crime scene. Financial records revealed a clear motive. Investigators traced a series of transactions and withdrawals that coincided with the days leading up to and following the murders. The prosecution argued that mounting financial pressure and a contentious child support dispute had driven Park to commit the crimes. The forensic case was further strengthened by the discovery of Park's palm print on a plastic bag identical to those found at the scene. Batch numbers on the bags matched those purchased by Park, and the prosecution demonstrated the improbability of this being a coincidence. The jury was presented with a comprehensive timeline showing Park's movements, the acquisition of materials and the disposal of evidence. The prosecution's case was methodical, leaving little room for doubt. The defence struggled to counter the overwhelming evidence. Their arguments focused on procedural technicalities and attempted to cast doubt on the forensic findings, but these efforts were largely unconvincing. After careful deliberation, the jury returned a unanimous verdict of guilty on all counts. The judge, in delivering the sentence, described Park's actions as calculated, callous, and utterly devoid of remorse. Nick Park was sentenced to 26 years in prison, with a non-parole period reflecting the gravity of his crimes. He was immediately transferred to a maximum security facility, where he will spend the foreseeable future. With the conviction secured and the evidence sealed, the Suitcase murders case was officially closed. The investigation stands as a testament to the dedication of law enforcement and forensic professionals, bringing justice to a tragedy that began with a single, smouldering suitcase in the quiet Australian bush. The investigation into the Suitcase murders hinged on one crucial piece of evidence, the suitcase itself. Forensic experts approached the analysis with painstaking precision, recognizing that every fibre, particle and scratch could hold the key to unravelling the mystery. First, forensic technicians conducted a full material analysis. The suitcase's outer shell, made of reinforced polycarbonate, bore a distinct set of scratches and abrasions. Using microscopic comparison, analysts matched these marks to the rough terrain where the suitcase was dragged, tracing its final journey into the bush. Serial numbers and manufacturing batch codes embedded in the suitcase lining were cross-referenced with retail records, leading investigators directly to a purchase made by Nick Park weeks before the murders. Inside the suitcase, trace evidence told an even deeper story. Forensic vacuuming and taping recovered hair fibres, textile fragments and soil particles. Advanced DNA extraction techniques identified the victims with certainty, while a single fibre from Park's own clothing was found woven into the suitcase's lining, a detail that placed him at the scene beyond any reasonable doubt. Chemical analysis revealed faint residues of cleaning agents and adhesives, suggesting an attempt to destroy evidence. However, forensic chemists isolated unique compounds that matched products found in Park's home, further linking him to the crime. Perhaps most crucial was the discovery of a partial palm print, preserved in a thin layer of dust on the inner surface. Using state-of-the-art imaging and enhancement, fingerprint analysts reconstructed the print and confirmed it belonged to Park. This, combined with the presence of his fingerprints on the suitcase's zip and handles, provided irrefutable proof of his involvement. The suitcase became the linchpin of the prosecution's case, a silent witness whose secrets were unlocked by the meticulous work of forensic science. This detailed analysis not only established Park's guilt, but also showcased the power of modern forensic investigation in uncovering the truth behind even the most carefully concealed crimes. As the forensic investigation deepened, the expertise of forensic pathologists became critical to understanding the full scope of the crime. The autopsies were performed under strict protocols, with every step meticulously documented. The victims' bodies, recovered from the suitcase, presented unique challenges due to the conditions of concealment and transport. Pathologists began by conducting thorough external examinations, noting injuries, signs of restraint, and any post-mortem changes. Careful analysis of bruising patterns and ligature marks provided vital clues about the manner and sequence of the assaults. Internal examinations revealed evidence of blunt force trauma and asphyxiation, findings that were consistent with a violent struggle. Estimating the time of death required a combination of methods, body temperature measurements, rigor mortis progression, and the presence of insect activity. Experts correlated these factors with environmental data, ultimately narrowing the window to within 24 hours of the victim's last confirmed sighting. This timeline matched key surveillance footage and witness statements, strengthening the case's chronology. Toxicology screens performed on tissue and fluid samples ruled out the presence of sedatives or poisons, indicating that the victims had not been incapacitated chemically. Instead, the cause of death was attributed to mechanical asphyxiation, a finding confirmed through detailed analysis of neck structures and airway tissues. During the trial, the lead forensic pathologist took the stand, presenting clear scientific explanations supported by photographic evidence and laboratory results. Their testimony was pivotal, translating complex medical data into compelling, understandable facts for the jury. The experts' conclusions left little doubt. The victims had died as a result of deliberate, forceful actions, and the evidence aligned precisely with the prosecution's narrative. In the end, the work of forensic pathology provided not just answers, but a voice for the victims, ensuring that the truth was recognized and that justice could be served. As the forensic evidence painted a chilling picture of the crime, investigators turned to another powerful tool: criminal profiling. Behavioral analysts were brought in to examine the nature of the offense, the method of concealment, and the psychological patterns revealed at the scene. The process began with a detailed assessment of the crime's organization. Experts noted the meticulous efforts to hide the bodies, indicating a perpetrator who was methodical, deliberate, and likely familiar with law enforcement procedures. The selection of a remote disposal site and the use of a suitcase as a container suggested planning, emotional detachment, and a desire to control both the victims and the investigation's trajectory. Behavioral analysts constructed a profile by integrating crime scene findings with established offender typologies. They considered the risk factors taken by the perpetrator, the apparent lack of remorse, and the calculated steps to avoid detection. These insights pointed to an individual who was likely socially adept, capable of blending in, yet harbored deep-seated grievances or compulsions. Investigators also analysed communication patterns, financial records and prior criminal behaviours, searching for consistencies with the emerging profile. Geographic profiling techniques helped narrow down possible suspect locations, focusing on individuals with knowledge of the area and access to transportation. Throughout the investigation, behavioural analysis did not operate in isolation. Instead, it served as a bridge, linking physical evidence, witness testimony and digital footprints. This multidisciplinary approach enabled law enforcement to refine their suspect pool, anticipate future behaviours, and ultimately direct resources where they were needed most. In the end, criminal profiling provided critical direction, transforming a seemingly random act into a solvable case. By understanding the mind behind the crime, investigators moved one step closer to ensuring that justice would prevail. As the investigation intensified, the pursuit of justice demanded not just keen detective work, but unwavering adherence to legal and procedural standards. Every step, from the moment a clue was uncovered to the courtroom's final verdict, was governed by strict protocols designed to protect the rights of all involved and preserve the integrity of the case. The process began with the crucial task of obtaining search and arrest warrants. Investigators meticulously compiled probable cause statements, presenting judges with detailed evidence that justified each request. These legal documents granted law enforcement the authority to search premises, seize items, and detain suspects, always under the careful scrutiny of judicial oversight. Once evidence was collected, a rigorous chain of custody protocol was enacted. Every item, from forensic samples to digital devices, was logged, sealed, and tracked at each stage of handling. This unbroken record ensured that evidence remained uncontaminated and admissible in court, providing a transparent trail from crime scene to courtroom. As the case progressed to trial, procedural fairness took centre stage. Prosecutors and defence attorneys engaged in discovery, exchanging evidence and witness lists to guarantee a fair contest. Pre-trial motions shaped the boundaries of what would be presented, while expert witnesses were vetted for credibility and relevance. In court, the burden of proof rested firmly on the prosecution. Evidence was introduced methodically, with each piece authenticated by those who collected or analysed it. Witnesses gave sworn testimony, subject to cross-examination by the defence. Throughout, the judge ensured that proceedings adhered to legal standards, safeguarding the defendant's rights and the legitimacy of the verdict. Ultimately, the careful orchestration of legal and procedural steps, warrant acquisition, chain of custody and courtroom rigour, was fundamental to the pursuit of justice. By honouring these principles, investigators and legal professionals ensured that the truth, once revealed, could withstand the highest levels of scrutiny. The ramifications of the Parks case extended far beyond the courtroom, leaving a lasting imprint on forensic science law enforcement protocols and public consciousness. For forensic professionals, the case became a benchmark in the application of emerging technologies. The meticulous analysis of trace evidence, digital data, and advanced DNA profiling not only secured a conviction but also set new standards for investigative thoroughness. Laboratories across the country adopted updated protocols inspired by the lessons learned, emphasizing cross-disciplinary collaboration and the critical importance of maintaining an unbroken chain of custody. Law enforcement agencies, too, took heed. Training programs were revised to incorporate scenario-based instruction drawn directly from the Parks investigation. Officers and detectives were encouraged to approach crime scenes with heightened attention to detail, recognizing that even the smallest oversight could jeopardize a case. Additionally, interagency communication became more streamlined, with regional task forces established to pool resources and expertise when tackling complex crimes. Public perception shifted as well. Media coverage of the case paired with transparent legal proceedings fostered greater trust in the justice system's ability to handle sensitive and challenging investigations. Community forums and educational outreach initiatives were launched, aiming to demystify forensic procedures and encourage civic engagement. The Parks case, once a grim headline, evolved into a catalyst for positive change, driving innovation, accountability, and a renewed commitment to truth within the criminal justice system.